All right, so back to on note button here on click, we want to be able to save something, at least to delegate the save action. So what we need to do here is very simple. We do have, because remember we're still inside of our note screen. So we're going to pass this on date. So we're going to pass this on add note and pass that actual note. Okay. We're going to say on add note like that. It expects us to pass a note, and we can just create a note right away here. Remember, it's going to be our note. Stack. And so we don't have to pass the ID because that is created randomly. We're going to pass the title. It's going to be a title. Again, because the title, the argument name is the same as the variable we're passing. That's fine to just add title like that. And we're going to pass description like this. Like this. So we're getting these states that we created, description and title, and we are passing them along on add note there. Okay. Now, after all that is done, let's just add a little toast message here. So toast messages in Android are short messages that we can pop up on the screen. They don't take too long to just give the user some sort of idea, clue that something has happened. Okay. So I'm going to say toast. There we go. And say make text like this. And you notice that it will require us to pass, you notice it will require us to pass a context. How do we get a context? First of all, a context in Android, global class that has all the information about an application environment. So you will hear a lot of context in Android development. So think of it as a way of accessing the application specific resources and classes. So that's what a context is. Now, in this case here, the toast need that context, which needs to know where does this belong as we add this message, right? This short pop-up message. So that's why we need to pass a context. Now, because we're not necessarily inside of an activity, so we can't really get the context as we usually do if you've done some Android development. What we need to do, let's go outside here. To get a context, I'm going to say val, create a variable, context. What do? We say local context, like that, and say current. If you hover over, you can say return the value provided by the nearest composition local provider. So this is how we get the context. So coming down here, then we can use that context as such. And then we're going to pass the text, the message, note, added. And then we're going to pass also the length, right? Toast that length. I want this to be short. Okay, and let's not forget to show it. Okay, there we have it. So now we're going to have a toast that will appear once the note has been added. In this case, once we have clicked on the note button. So essentially this. And if we go down here, we see that inside of our note row, we're also passing on note clicked. So what we want to happen when we click on a note. Well, for this, in this case, all we want is to invoke the on remove and pass the it. In this case, it's going to be the note. We could have passed the it. That would be fine too. And because it's the same thing, it's a note. Okay, that's what we want to do. Remember, we're inside of note screen. So this is going to happen when we call it in main or somewhere else. Okay, so this has been called on main activity. As you see here, we have note screen, we have this data source and all that. So on remove here, we can then implement the on remove and go from there. But how do we add those notes, right? Because we want to be able to add those notes when we click on save, once we added the title and the note. So the first approach would be something like this. We'll create a variable. I'm going to call, for instance, notes. I'm going to say is equal to remember, right? And then here I could say mutable state list of like this. And I would have to say right before the parentheses that the types we're expecting, this angle brackets here, the types that we're expecting is going to be note, right? Our note like this. So in this case here, then we have this notes, if you have over, is indeed a snapshot state list. So that means it's listening to a state. So we have a list that's wrapped around a state, and we have a remember so that it will remember as we do recomposition and so forth. That would mean then on add note, because we know when we said note screen here, on add note, when that is called, we're going to add an object, right? A note. So now we're implementing everything here. So what we would do here, we would say, well, we have that note that's been passed around. I'm going to say here, right? Snapshot there. I'm going to say dot add and pass IT, which in this case is a note object. Let's go ahead and run this to see if it will work. Okay, let's see. If I go and add, first add hello world, let's see. Note added. But in that case, then what we want to do is we want to remove this load notes there, because that's not what we want, right? I'm going to have to pass the actual notes like this for our notes list. Let's try again. Of course, if you run this, you'll notice that all of these will go away. So it's going to be empty because we're not getting anything from our dummy data now. We're getting from our notes mutable state list here. Okay, let's see if this works. Hello again, some gibberish. Let's say add, and voila, it works, right? We can say another one again and add, and it is indeed working. All right, it works perfectly. We have the notes and clickable is working. Now let's go ahead and add the remove. So to remove, what do we do? Well, all we do, we say notes, right? Dot remove element, which is going to be our IT, which is the note. Now let's look at on remove. Before we move, let's check to see that we have everything set up. And I can see that on note row, the on note clicked is not being called anywhere. Aha, we need to pass here on note clicked. I'm going to pass our note object like this. Let's go ahead and remove that note. So it's very easy. I'm going to say notes. Okay, dot remove that element IT, which is going to be that node. Okay, let's go ahead and run. Okay, let's go ahead and add something. Okay, let's click. All right, it's removing. That's great. Come down here, save again, add and save. And okay, so we can keep adding whatever we want to add. All these items, when you click, they will be removed. All right, this is great. We should be happy that this is happening. However, this is not the best practices. The reason being is because, first of all, this notes that we're passing here, this is a state that is connected directly in the main activity, and because it's a state that needs to be heavily related or heavily connected to data, it's not a good thing to have it inside here. Because imagine that we want a different class or a different composable to have access to the same data. Potentially this could be the data, right? Because this is notes, it's a mutable state list, right, of notes. If that's the case, the state here of notes, this mutable state, it's only here. It's not going to be accessible anywhere else in our project. And that's a problem. Now, how do we solve this? How do we hoist this very important state to a different class somewhere else that is independent from this one class or this composable? That's what we're going to learn in the next videos.